What's going on, everybody? Welcome. This is Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, episode 573. Today, Andrew and I are talking about the differences between martial arts coaches, martial arts instructors, and martial arts teachers.
Yeah.
If you want to know what that all means, and as you can see, I got a little bit tongue-tied as I was putting those words together, stick around. Well, if you're new to the show, you might be interested to know that there's a video version of this. We're trying to get more video going. So check it out on YouTube. You can see the shininess. You can compare the shininess between my skull and Andrew's skull. It's quite the race that we're running here, my friend.
Maybe that's the next poll we put on Whistlekick.
And there's a good point to bring up. We have a Facebook group, Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio Behind the Scenes. Of course, we've got whistlekick.com. And if you go to whistlekick.com, you can find out all the stuff that we've got, from the Facebook group to the website for Martial Arts Radio to the store. And if you make a purchase in the store, you help support us. And you can use the code podcast15, save yourself 15% off a shirt or a training program or one of the many things that we've got over there. And the goal of the show is really, it's to connect and educate and entertain the traditional martial artists of the world. That's why we do what we do. We are all at Whistlekick passionate martial artists, and we want to support you in your passion for training. If making a purchase isn't the way that you want to help us, and hopefully you are willing to help us, we've got a bunch of things you can do. You can follow social media, you can tell people about what we're doing, or we've got a Patreon, patreon.com/whistlekick. Patreon's a great place for us because it means we can give back to those who give the most to us. If you make a contribution, a monthly contribution for as little as $2, you're going to get some original, not to be seen anywhere else, Whistlekick content, everything from behind the scenes on the podcast to exclusive video, audio, books, training programs. We put a bunch of stuff up there for free, depending on your tier, just to say thank you. And so let's get into this. Now, this came in from a question from a listener, right?
I don't remember. I think it was first brought up on your First Cup, one of your First Cup early morning YouTube shows.
That makes sense. That rings a bell. Yeah. And I'm sure I talked about it. I don't remember because it was early. And this is one of the interesting things about First Cup is that, we start the show and I'm like, and get into my first cup of coffee, hence the incredibly creative name. It's the most creative I've ever named anything. And as you can tell, it's not a very creative name. We keep things simple over here. But it's an interesting question, right? The difference between a sensei and a sifu. There's some inherent difference in there. We know pretty much automatically a sensei is going to be a martial arts instructor of some kind of Japanese Okinawan martial arts style, right? A sifu is going to be some manner of Chinese-based martial art. We can draw some inherent differences, but what about the English terms of coach and instructor and
teacher? Yeah.
Are there really differences in there? And I think that there are. I mean, you obviously picked up on this question when it came up on First Cup. So what were your thoughts? What was your initial reaction?
Well, I needed time to mull it over and really think about it because they are often used interchangeably. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you feel that a teacher and an instructor is the same thing, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it led me to think about it quite a bit in the next couple of days. And that's why I said, you know what, why don't we discuss this on an episode? Because I think in your First Cup discussion, it was only 3 or 4 minutes. You gave a quick kind of, this is my initial thought of what a coach is, blah, blah, blah. And I thought maybe we could go a little more in depth and bring it to a full Whistlekick episode and talk about what our opinions are on the differences between the three. If there are differences in our opinion.
Absolutely. I suspect there will be. Usually you and I differ at least a little bit, which is the fun part of having these conversations. And of course, we're talking about nuance. And is there anything that martial artists like debating and really beating into the ground more than nuance? No, you don't hold your fist like this. You have to turn it 7.5 degrees this way, and that foot, your big toe needs to point there, unless, of course, you're one of those Neanderthal derivatives where your middle toe is longer than your other toes, in which case you've got to do this. And man, we like nuance, and that's okay. It makes it fun. So right off the bat, we've got these three terms: coach and instructor and teacher. And in my mind, coach is slightly different than instructor and teacher, which are closer together.
I would agree with that.
And for me, when I think about these terms, I think the easiest way for me to wrap my mind around them was to use them in non-martial arts context. When I think about calling someone a coach versus calling someone an instructor versus calling them a teacher, where does that happen? A coach is pretty obvious. It happens in an athletic context.
Exactly.
High school sports, even, t-ball or professional sports, we use that term coach from the bottom to the top. And it's a pretty interesting term in that way because there aren't a whole lot of other things where the best in the world and the worst in the world are given the same honorific title.
Yeah, it's very true. I think it absolutely has a specific goal orientated thing you're working towards. I don't think it necessarily has to be sports per se. I think 99% of the time that is the case. But I think if you're a coach, you can coach someone in something that's not sports.
Sure.
But it is usually you're coaching them for a specific goal or some sort of competition, something of that nature.
Right. Right. To me, the goal of a coach is to get the best result from the participants. So we could be talking about, if we want to, maybe I'll be a little bit nerdy, self-deprecating. I had a debate coach in high school. Sure. And a math team coach. And, there were trivia challenges through school. We had teachers who took the role of coach in certain contexts for some kind of competition. And I think that that's the first thing to split because, I think most of us, when we think coach, we tend to think athletics, but it doesn't necessarily need to be an athletic pursuit, but just some manner of competitive drive.
Some competitive pursuit, and it doesn't even have to be like, let's take the example of your debate coach. He or she would likely coach you on debate techniques, but also perhaps some psyche of how to react to things. So it wasn't necessarily a single-edged, this is the thing I'm coaching you on. It was everything that you're going to need to know about this particular performance, in this case, a debate, right? Mm-hmm. This is all the stuff that you're going to need to know. Some of it will be physical, maybe. I mean, maybe not in a debate physical, but some of it's going to be mental, and but I think the biggest thing is that it's getting you towards a specific goal.
Right. And I like how you talked about multifaceted. When we think about a coach, right off the bat, again, we're thinking about often athletics, but some manner of competitive aspect. And this is where I think the term coach can differ from an instructor or a teacher. Think about every popular movie, at least that I've seen, that has a strong coach, a coach as a, let's say, a primary character. It's usually a sports movie, something.
Yep.
Like Any Given Sunday is a great example because you've got, as far as I'm concerned, one of the best actors of all time, Al Pacino, in that role. And what happens in at least every one of those movies with football? There's some kind of thing going on in the locker room at halftime, right? There's always a speech.
Yep.
There's always some really poignant, powerful speech as the coach tries to get into the psyche of the players and say, here is how you move forward from this obstacle. And when I think of an instructor or a teacher, that doesn't come to mind for me as strongly. Now, I've certainly had instructors and teachers in various ways who were concerned and invested in my personal growth beyond necessarily the subject matter, but not all of them, not in the way that a coach is typically responsible for. What's the goal of an instructor or a teacher? To my mind, it's presenting the information. It is making sure that the individuals that they are responsible for have knowledge. Yep. The responsibility of the coach is performance.
Correct. Exactly. I think that, to me, that's the distinction.
So I think that's probably a good place to put a pin in coach and move on, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So now when we look at instructor versus teacher, I think a lot of people, I would say most people use the two interchangeably. But the question is, are they? Now, this is where if I was writing a paper, one of my instincts would be to go to the dictionary and compare the definitions, which is about as cliche as you get. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good place when you're having a debate on language. It's a good place to start, but we're not going to do that. I'm looking at examples over my lifetime. I'm thinking of the people that are instructors and people that are teachers. And to me, they are responsible for the same thing generally 98% of the time, but to me an instructor is someone who is more competent.
Interesting. I don't see that. I don't make that distinction myself, but I would be interested to hear why you think that.
If I have, let's say I go to a conference and let's say it's any subject, let's make it not martial arts for now. Let's say it's a conference on marketing, something I spend a lot of time doing. It's a marketing conference. And I have a choice of 2 sessions that are roughly on the same subject. They're on using social media to achieve a result. And one is instructed by a certain person who I don't know, and the other is taught by a certain person that I don't know. Right there, I think my instinct is, oh, instructed. That has a gravitas to me of being more competent, more polished. I could imagine an instructor presenting information to teachers. I don't necessarily see the reverse. I don't necessarily see a teacher presenting information to a group of instructors.
Interesting. So what you're saying is, if I can paraphrase or elaborate more, it's an instructor is someone who's specialized in a specific thing, and a teacher teaches more general. Is that kind of how you see it?
No, it's okay. If we think about it in the context of martial arts, I can put anybody. Let's say I'm teaching a class, and I'm the only person of black belt rank, and there are 40 people in the room, but I've got somebody who's been there for a couple years, and maybe they're a green belt and they know some stuff, right? I can have them go teach the first form. I'd like you to take those white belts and go to the back of the room and go over Pinyon Shodan. That's an example that I bet many of you listening or watching have observed or maybe even participated in. But I'm not going to call that person, that green belt, an instructor. They're a teacher in that context.
Would you call them a teacher in that context, really?
I would. They're going to go
Interesting.
teach. In order to teach, one must be a teacher. But I would never say that they are instructing that group. I would say they're teaching that group. Now, when I think of a martial arts context, I might imagine that someone who is a 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever degree black belt may stand in the front of the room and instruct a class. Now, this could just be based on the context of how these words have been used around me, right? And if Andrew, if your experience is completely different, could just be the way people around you have used those terms.
Yeah, the way we were brought up. Yeah, sure.
Because again, I think that they are so close that we're really, maybe it's a little broader than splitting hairs, but it's not a dramatic difference. I'm never going to be offended if someone calls me one versus the other. And I wouldn't imagine very many people would.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it is very nuanced, the difference. And I encourage people to think about it for yourself, and certainly let us know what your thoughts are.
Absolutely.
The difference between an instructor and a teacher. I think for me, the instructor is someone who is specialized in something. So for example, someone who's instructing, if we martial arts terms, like we're specialized in teaching this one thing, but a teacher might teach, something on not as broad a scale, like not as specialized in a classroom setting. Like an instructor will maybe specialized in teaching this type of physics, but a teacher would be like a science teacher. They're teaching lots of different disciplines within. So the science teacher might be teaching some physics and might be teaching some biology and some chemistry, but when you get to college and you are taking specific type of chemistry, that's an instructor. That's how I thought of it in this last
Yeah,
week.
I can see that. Now, would you use the term instructor and professor interchangeably then?
I probably would. Yeah.
And I see where you're going there. So it's to further add complexity to this nerdy word debate that we're in the middle of, which I enjoy. In case you can't tell, if you're not watching, you're not seeing the smile on my face. There is less of a gap, less of a delta. Let's be even nerdier between instructor and professor in your mind than there is between instructor and teacher.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. And of course, professor is a term that people use in the martial arts. I'm most familiar with that in the context of Filipino martial arts, but I have seen it used elsewhere. It tends to be a higher rank honorific. Seventh, generally seventh and up is where I've seen it. I don't have a huge amount of context for that, so I'm not drawing any kind of line in the sand there.
Yeah.
But I think this is where now, again, if you've been a long time listener of this show, you know that the majority of my experience is in Japanese and Okinawan martial arts. So I'm most familiar with Japanese terminology. But this is where, for me, the progression of terms senpai, sensei, renshi, shihan, kyoshi, hanshi comes in, right? And not every system in school uses all of those titles, but that is, as I was taught them, a generalized progression up. And, they have a rough correlation to rank, but I don't know that's necessarily relevant. So when you say teacher, I think sensei. When you say instructor, I'm thinking shihan or kyoshi, which are, of course, more time in theory, more skill, more knowledge. And the idea that you brought up with the relating it back to academics and the more specialization, that's really interesting to me, because I think inevitably that happens with any pursuit. The instructor in the context of martial arts may have a thing that they are really great at instructing. I was about to say teaching, really great at instructing, even though they're good or even great at passing on information on a variety of subjects. When we think of people who are really competent, long-standing martial artists with a great degree of knowledge, there tends to be something that people will say, you know what, they're the best at X. And I don't think people generally say that about a teacher. They're the best at Y. Doesn't
you're
tend
right.
to happen.
You're right. I would say, though, an instructor can teach.
Sure.
I mean, someone who's been doing, you mentioned your special, your special, not specialty, but you have done the most experience with Japanese and Okinawan martial arts. Same for me. If someone has been doing, Shorin-ryu karate for 65 years, they're at this point, and they're, have been having their own school, they're probably an instructor. That doesn't mean they can't teach something that's not Shorin-ryu. They can teach principles that aren't that specific discipline. So I do think an instructor can teach, and I think teachers can instruct if they're instructing one specific thing. Giving instruction is not the same as being an instructor.
So now here's the last, for me, the last piece of this discussion. I think we would agree, at least I would say, that an instructor and a teacher could coach, but could a coach necessarily instruct and teach? I think it's a stronger relationship in one direction than it is the other.
It is, but you said, can they? The answer is yes. Of course you could. I mean, I could make an argument for there. I'm sure there are coaches out there who do instruct and are instructors, and vice versa. But I do think it does go easier one way than the other. You're right.
Yeah. And I think this is a great topic to take into the Facebook group. When this episode launches, which it'll be in a few weeks, 573. So as of our recording on this is going to be just a couple weeks. A couple weeks from when we're recording this. I'm hoping that people will watch, listen, and jump into the Facebook group. Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio Behind the Scenes is the easiest way to search for it. And just let us know what you think. And I think on top of that, are there other somewhat generic terms that should be included in this? Teacher, coach, instructor. We added in professor without even talking about it ahead of time. It just kind of came up organically. Is there something else that we're missing? And if there is, how do those relate? Is there a necessary hierarchy? Are there places where those terms are inappropriate? I think that's probably the easiest place to start. So I want to see what people think.
Yeah, and I would be interested in sticking to Western terminology. Like, I mean, we can start bringing in sensei and sifu and
I'd really rather not.
But let's not. Like, I would rather not. Like, I would like to stick with Western terminology that we're used to. One I thought of was
kind of discussion when we
absolutely. One I thought of was mentor. And I think that adds in a different complexity.
Let's leave that. That's a great thing to do. Let's serve that up. If you want to add your feelings on the term mentor, let's jump in. I really love it when we have good discussion in that group. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it adds some context to the things that we talk about, and it gives us opportunity to look at what people want us to discuss. So there's a little bit of selfishness in there. There's a lot of selfishness. Let's call it what it is.
No, let's get some good discussion in there. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Anything else before we roll out?
No, I don't think so. That's good.
All right. Well, like we said, if you want to add to the conversation, go to Facebook, Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio behind the scenes. Of course, every episode is on whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. The disaster of the triple hacking has been resolved. We are digging out from the holes. The new site is up and running, and no, it's not finished, but at least all the functional stuff is there, and we're rolling back and cleaning it up. What are you going to find over there? You're going to find photos and videos and links and notes and a place to comment. So if you want your comment to exist outside of Facebook, that's where you can put it. And if you want to support what we're doing, go to Patreon, leave us some money. You can also share episodes. You can tell people what's going on. You can buy some at whistlekick.com. Anything that you do to support really goes a long way. It helps emotionally and it helps financially. If you see somebody out there wearing something with Whistlekick, say hello. If you've got guest suggestions, topic suggestions, let us know. Email me, jeremy@whistlekick.com. Our social media is @whistlekick. And that's it. So say it with me, Andrew. Until next time, train hard,
smile,
and have a great day.